Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be reviewing the books that I read back in October. So I won't go into a huge amount of detail here, but basically my life over the past 2 months has been incredibly busy, especially my professional life. I have been doing a lot of traveling up and down the country and not spent a lot of time just kind of sat in my living room enjoying my bookshelves, reading my books. I didn't see a huge amount of impact on the quantity of my reading in October, but when we get to wrapping up what I read in November in another video, I read far fewer books in November than I normally do. I read 10 books in October and I did manage to read some of the books that I had on my spooky TBR. I do like to read seasonally, so I read some kind of spooky or autumnal books around the Halloween period. So I'm going to kick things off by talking about those. And the first of those was Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. This was just the most perfect cozy autumnal book for me. This is about a young witch called Belladonna Blackthorn. And I really love that this young witch, she's approaching her 30th birthday. She's using magic for the things that I feel like typically I might use it for, just to make my life that a little bit easier. She's using her magic to sort out the bookshelves at the bookshop that she works in, and a real love for bookshops shines through in this book, and I adored that. But she's also using her magic for things like making herself a cup of tea. As she is approaching her 30th birthday, she is summoned in front of her coven, and she is tasked with proving her worthiness for her magic. Magic is this limited resource, and if she's not using it for something that is important and impactful, she runs the risk of losing her powers. And as she goes through that journey of beginning to harness her magic more, it works allegorically for her finding her sparkle in her own personal self-belief in her personal life as well. She finds herself being reintroduced to all of her capabilities, all the things that she is able to do that she had forgotten about or neglected to harness. I enjoyed this book so much. As I said, it was the perfect cozy autumnal read. I felt so immersed in this story, and I'm going to talk about this in a separate video, but I feel like cozy fantasy is something that has been quite new to me this year and I've really enjoyed. I do think there were aspects of the pacing of the book that wasn't perfect, and I also feel like the romance subplot didn't feel like it was kind of naturally integrated. I think that may have been something that was possibly put into the story at a later date because it just didn't feel like it was seamlessly woven into the tapestry of this novel. But I feel like those more critical aspects really don't matter, because what I'm really looking for in my reading is for a book to make me feel something, and I think this book made me feel exactly as it was intended to. It was so cozy, so enjoyable, and it opened my eyes to a genre that I would really like to read more of. I also read Queen Bee by Juno Dawson. So this is the prequel to Her Majesty's Royal Coven. So there's 2 books out in that series and I really loved them. This is the prequel that is set in the 1500s and follows the aftermath of Anne Boleyn's death. And we are following Lady Grace Fairfax as she suspects there was some form of foul play involved in Anne Boleyn's death. She suspects that someone has betrayed Anne Boleyn and the entire coven. Grace also feels a huge amount of personal loss because not only was she part of this coven, but she was also Anne Boleyn's lover. And I love queer themes being introduced to novels that have historical aspects to them. I think it's so important to recognize and remind people that queer people have existed throughout all of history. It's not this kind of new thing. This book is also largely about witch hunts. King Henry VIII has pulled together a team of witch hunters who are seeking out these witches, and no one in the coven is safe. I don't know huge amounts about this time of history, and I do feel like whenever I read something that has to do with the royal family, whether that's a modern day interpretation or a historical interpretation, I need to just put the actual royal family aside and almost approach it as if it is fictional. And I think because the characters we were focused on in this book were characters that were in the royal circles but not royals themselves, helped me with that separation. This is quite a short one. It is a novella. It's a prequel to the main series. I didn't enjoy it as much as I did the more fully fleshed out novels in the series, but I think if you have enjoyed reading Her Majesty's Royal Coven and The Shadow Cabinet, it's definitely worth picking this one up as well. And I always just think the quality of Juno Dawson's writing is top tier. I also read The Secrets of Heartwood Hall by Katie Lumsden, who of course many of you will know as Books and Things. I enjoyed this so much, and I don't typically read a lot of historical fiction, so I found this really refreshing as something that's a bit different from the stuff I typically read. This is set in the mid-1800s, and we follow Margaret Lennox, who is a young widow who has been offered a position as a governess at Heartwood Hall. So it's set in this big kind of country house, which is a setting that I'm really growing to enjoy more. And the themes of isolation and mystery that just that setting can bring to a story. And it is that isolation that leads to Margaret feeling quite suspicious of what's going on around her. She feels a huge amount of fondness and affection for the young boy that she is caring for, but she definitely feels like there are weird things going on around the house. Whether that's strange figures lurking around or the gossip that goes amongst the staff at the house. And in the wider community, in the village, there is a significant amount of mistrust for Mrs. Eversham, who is effectively Margaret's boss. She is the widowed mother of the young boy that Margaret is caring for. And I think that feeling of unease and suspicion is ramped up throughout the book in a really effective way, where it feels like you as the reader are gradually starting to feel the same level of unease that Margaret is, as she tries to figure out what's going on. And I thought how the truth was revealed was done really well. The quality of writing in this novel is just incredible. And I mean, I knew it would be, and I have to obviously say that I have a level of bias towards it with, you know, Katie being a close friend, but I was just so in awe of the quality of writing. It's so fantastically written. And I think it beautifully captures this kind of love letter to Victorian fiction in a way that was just really beautiful. I really struggled to put this one down once I got into it, and that is pretty rare for me and historical fiction, so such a big fan of this book. I also read a couple of romance books in October. So I read The Breakup Tour by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegmund Broca. I mentioned this one recently in a video I did about books that have the same titles as Taylor Swift songs, and whilst this one doesn't have the same title as a Taylor Swift song, it is one that I am certain that Swifties will absolutely love. So we are following Riley Wynn, who is this like mega American singer-songwriter. She has become this huge star overnight because of this concept album that she has created, which is all about breakups, and in particular there is an unforgettable lead song. Now Riley's ex-husband is claiming that he was the inspiration for this song, which really pisses off Riley because he wasn't. It was actually her college boyfriend. Now, Riley and Max, the ex-boyfriend, haven't spoken to each other since their breakup, but Riley attempts to reconnect with Max because she wants to clear up the truth that this song is really about him. So Riley asks for him to go public as the muse for this song and invites him on stage to perform the song with her. And this book is a second chance romance for the two of them as they find themselves on tour together. And I found the chemistry between the two characters really believable, but I also found them really compelling as individuals. So for instance, the conflict that Max has around whether he does want to pursue a career as a musician, or if he is very happy staying in his hometown and working in his family's retirement home. And he gets a lot of conflicting messages from those around him, but he also feels quite conflicted about it internally. And I think the aspects of this novel that will be really compelling to Taylor Swift fans, particularly if you are a Swiftie that is really invested in her personal life, we'll be seeing how this character's entire personal life is impacted by the fandom and media frenzy around her, how it impacts her ability to have genuine relationships, but also how she constructs situations with her fans and the media to push the narrative that she desires. I really like novels that deal with the nature of celebrity as well. So for instance, books like Daisy Jones and the Six, if you liked that one, this one definitely has like more romance to it, but it also deals with those same themes of the nature of celebrity. I really enjoyed this one, and I would be keen to pick up the next book from these two authors that is coming out next year. I also read Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I feel like I was the last person on earth that hadn't read this book yet, and I am so glad that I did. I mean, it's another one where I had to put aside my feelings on the actual royal family in order to enjoy this book, but I'm very glad that I was able to do that because this was so much fun. So this is a romance between the first son of the United States. So he is the son of the first female president of the United States, and then we also have a Prince of England. Both of them are at the age where the tabloids are after them. Any information about their private lives is a huge scoop, and they are both running the risks of exposing things about their private lives as they get involved in the kind of socialite party scene. An altercation between the two of them is captured, which could prove to be very damaging for US and British relations, particularly in the run-up to an election. So the two heads of states kind of get together, get their PR teams together, and want to push the narrative that these two young men are actually really great friends. And of course, as the two boys start to get to know each other, it blossoms from enemies to friends to romance, and a hell of a lot of sexual chemistry. Again, this was another one that dealt with kind of the nature of celebrity, something that I really appreciate reading about, really enjoy reading about. And I thought the connection between these two characters felt so authentic. Not only that kind of indescribable level of chemistry that two people can have, but also the fact that no one else can really understand what these young men are experiencing apart from each other. No one else has that kind of exposure or pressure on their shoulders, and they can really support each other in that way. I've not watched the film of this yet, but I will really soon. If you have watched the film, let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think I'll enjoy it as much as I enjoy the book? I read 2 pieces of non-fiction in October, one for adults, one for kids. The one for adults was Too Much by Tom Allen. So I do think that this is Tom's second memoir. I've not read the first one, but I had seen bits and pieces of Tom on TV. He is a comedian, mainly working in the UK. And I've always thought he was like pretty funny. I don't think I've watched any of his kind of like full stand-up shows. He's not someone that I've seen perform in person, but I've seen him on like panel shows and bits and pieces and stuff, and I've always really liked him. But this book follows him at quite an important turning point in his life. He feels like he is really settled, you know, he's got the steady partner, he's got the house, he started tending to his garden, he feels like a proper grown-up and he's fully settled. But this book is also largely about the grief that he experiences following the aftermath of his father's death, and that was something that I felt like I would really connect with going into this book. I did find that the nature of relationship between father and son and father and daughter is actually quite distinct. But nonetheless, I really appreciated someone talking so openly about the death of a parent and the impact that it has on you. And I found it really touching how Tom looks back on moments of connection with his father, but also continues to find moments of connection with him even after he has passed on. And I think another thing that I really appreciated about the book was, and it's expected that a comedian would bring this to this story, right? But is that sense of humor, because so often humor is the thing that really gets you through grief, and it is so important. I found it really thoughtful. I found Tom came across really charming, and I think his voice really came through in his writing as well, which I think is so important for memoirs. In terms of the nonfiction that I read for child readers, I read You Have the Power by Leah Williamson. Leah Williamson is, of course, a footballer. She captains the England Lionesses team and plays for Arsenal, but we won't hold either of those things against her. And this is a book about finding inner strength, encouraging and motivating children to find that strength, to find the perseverance that they need to achieve their dreams. I think Leah is a hugely inspirational figure, particularly for young girls, and especially those that are wanting to get into sports. I think if there had been prominent sportswomen, specifically female footballers, when I was growing up, I would have found it hugely impactful. So I'm thrilled that something like this exists now with the kind of profile that Leah has. I really liked how she drew on her experiences of feeling kind of sidelined as she was growing up and didn't have those kind of figures to look to. I really appreciated how she shared experiences of having to play for the boys' teams and how people looked at her differently for being a girl who was involved in sport, and how she has continued to be a champion and advocate for women in sport throughout her career, and the lessons that you can take from that even as a child reader as you make your way through this book. And to be honest, I think adults can often use the reminders that are included in these kind of motivational books to remind yourself that you can achieve what you want to do. There is no one that can stop you. This won't be one that I'm keeping hold of. I will pass it on to a child reader, but I'm really glad that I read it nonetheless. I read 2 young adult books in October. One of those was for work, so I'm going to start with the one that wasn't for work, and that was Kissing Emma by Shappi Khorsandi. So this is the second book that I have read from this author. I read Nina Is Not Okay a few years ago, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. It was kind of unlike any young adult novel that I had read at that point, and I would actually really like to reread it. It dealt with some very heavy topics, as does Kissing Emma, so I would certainly say it's on kind of the upper end of young adult fiction. But the topics that were handled in this book, I have not really seen depicted anywhere else in the media. This is about a teenage girl named Emma who doesn't feel like there are a lot of opportunities coming her way. So her family are in quite a difficult financial situation. She and her mother find themselves moving back in with her mother's mother, sharing a very cramped space. Emma does not really have the kind of same economic or financial opportunities as some of the people around her. She's also not really happy in an academic setting. She doesn't thrive there. So the opportunities for her to gain kind of social mobility feel really limited to her. But what Emma has always had in her favour is her looks. She has always been considered very beautiful. She has always had a lot of attention from people around her looks. And as she gets older, she gets more and more attention from men specifically. So when 2 men come into her life and offer her the chance to make money from her appearance, she is definitely tempted, and little by little she finds herself in increasingly damaging and dangerous situations as these men increase their control over her life. Because she has never had money, she hasn't really developed a level of financial literacy to understand that while the money they are offering her now seems like huge amounts of money, to them, it is actually very little. I've never read a book that looked at this topic of how girls can find themselves in situations where they are exposing their bodies for money under the control of men. And the novel so perfectly demonstrates how control is gained little by little. Emma is a character who you deeply, deeply care for throughout the book. And I think this is actually one of the most important young adult books that I have read all year. And I can say the same for the other young adult book that I read in October, which was Pieces of Us by Stuart Foster. So this is one that is published by the place that I work, and it's also one that deals with some quite heavy topics. So we are following the friendship between 2 young men. It's set in the 90s, and that kind of love for 90s culture and specifically music really sings from the page. Both boys are going through a significant level of struggle when it comes to their mental health, and I will say that this book specifically deals with eating disorders and bulimia in men. And I think it is so important to be shining a focus on the fact that boys do suffer from these things, these kinds of compulsive behaviors, body dysmorphia. Those topics really aren't shied away from in the novel, and I think that makes it such a powerful depiction of those struggles. The novel was also an incredibly beautiful portrait of male friendship. It was written in such a poignant way where I hadn't really seen friendship depicted in that way before. Or that kind of really intimate, intense friendship. I've often seen that between female characters, but I've not seen it so much with male characters. As I said, it's definitely an emotionally hard-hitting one, but if the topics are of interest to you, it's one that you get a lot out of the reading experience. And then finally, in October, I also read Skandar and the Skeleton Curse by A.F. Stedman. So this is the 4th book in the series, so it's quite difficult to talk about this one without giving spoilers. But a very brief overview of the Skandar series as a whole. This is a series where unicorns are deadly. So they're not the kind of fluffy, pink, glittery unicorns. They can be bloodthirsty, they can be deadly. We follow our main character Skandar in his journey to becoming a unicorn rider. So he goes off to the Eyrie, which is the school where kids learn to become unicorn riders. They find themselves allied to a particular element. So typically this is earth, water, wind, or fire. But in the first book, we follow Skandar being allied to this mysterious 5th element called spirit, which has actually been banned because of how dangerous it is. That's the kind of initial setup for the series. As I said, I can't talk too specifically about the 4th book in the series without giving spoilers, but there are so many twists and turns in this book. It is so fantastically written. I think it is like the best written middle grade out there at the minute. It's so action-packed and cinematic, and I am dying to read the 5th book in the series. So that is it. They are all of the books that I read in October. Do leave me a comment down below and let me know if you read any of these and what you thought of them. If you don't have anything in particular to say, but you want to let me know you're here, leave me some sort of witchy emoji to celebrate the witchy books that I did manage to read in October. My November wrap-up will be coming very soon, but there won't be as many books to talk about in that wrap-up. Anyways, that's it from me. I hope you're doing well, and I'll speak to you in my next video.